sir, I remember मैंने आपसे एक साल पहले इकोनॉमी पे डिस्कशन किया था और हम जब रिसेशन की बातें कर रहे थे तो इन्वर्टेड यील्ड कर्व की आपने हमको बात समझाई थी उस समय. लेकिन अब ये रिसेशन फेयर्स जो है आर they genuine? Can we say that US is already into recession, but it's that it's not been declared yet?
A year ago, there were still apprehensions of a recession because of the inverted yield curve. पर क्या हुआ है कि until certainly the first half of this year, there was a continuing fiscal stimulus. The fiscal stimulus, the size of the fiscal deficit was running at 6 to 7% of GDP. That is very unusual in US economic history to have a persistent deficit of this size, 7% of GDP. ये बहुत ही कम समय होता है और normally the deficit is 3 or 4% of GDP. अब चल रहा है 7% के करीब. तो इसकी वजह से the recession was averted. Now the fear is that over the next few quarters, the fiscal stimulus may somehow be withdrawn in the sense that अब जो है कांग्रेस यूएस कांग्रेस में opposition की majority है, Republicans are in the majority, they are curtailing the spending power of the administration, and so so far we haven't seen the actual impact. But if you look at the latest GDP numbers for the second quarter in the US, the amount of benefit from government spending has come down. The impact of government spending on aggregate demand is a little bit lower. That could be a lot lower in the next 2 quarters, and that factor could weaken the US economy quite a bit. I don't think the US is going into recession any longer. I don't think it is currently in recession. But the unemployment rate is going up. और ये भी है कि जो unemployment rate बढ़ रहा है, that is happening primarily because high paying jobs are being lost. Net job losses on Wall Street and in Silicon Valley are higher. So there is actually a lot of low paid jobs. There's sufficient jobs in construction, there's sufficient jobs in manufacturing and things like services, hotels, restaurants, etc. There's sufficient job growth. Where there isn't job growth is in high paying jobs, which will have a slightly dampening effect on consumption. So I don't think it's a recession, but the unemployment rate is going to be edging up. It's 4.3%, which is normally considered full employment. Full employment is 4.5% or lower. So we're still 4.3. It'll probably get up to 4.5% by September, October. And most likely, in my view, the Fed made a policy error by not cutting at its July meeting. It had a chance to cut, but it didn't cut in July. If you look at month-on-month inflation, in the last 2 months, core PCE inflation is rising just 1% month-on-month. So it is rising less than the annualized pace of 2%, which is what the Fed tries to focus on. And so there was an opportunity to cut in July, but they didn't cut. And they will certainly cut in September. There are now expectations that they might cut 50 basis points in September because unemployment will rise quite a bit more substantially in the next couple of months, and the month-on-month change in core PCE inflation will be very low, will continue to decline, and as a result, there may well be pressure to cut more. Now, the interesting thing is that the Republican presidential candidate is saying, do not cut rates. If you cut rates, you are intervening in the political system. You are trying to help the incumbent. So, if anything, had there not been this political factor, they might even have cut 50 basis points in September. But the likelier thing is 25 basis points, simply because it is political season and they don't want to upset one of the political candidates too much. But you might get 25 basis points in September and 50 basis points in November. The November meeting is immediately after the election. The next 2 days, 6th and 7th of November, you could get a 50 basis point cut. So the point is, there is room for the US to cut because inflation is moderating and the unemployment rate is going